Hey everyone, and welcome to today's Explainer. We're about to embark on a pretty fascinating journey, going right into the center of the human body to decode the invisible machinery that's literally keeping you alive every single second. So, get ready because we are diving deep into the human respiratory system.
But look, before we jump into the anatomy, let's try a quick real-life activity. Wherever you are, just imagine standing up and running in place right now. Go on, seriously, picture it. Pumping your arms, lifting your knees. Run, run, run. Okay, now stop. What do you notice? Your chest is heaving, right? You're breathing heavily. But why is that? Well, that kind of hooks us into our core mystery for today. Why do our bodies so desperately demand air, especially when we push ourselves?
To answer that, we need to pin down exactly what we're looking at here. The human respiratory system is basically this massive, complex network of organs and tissues that helps us breathe. Its number one job is to introduce oxygen into the body and kick out carbon dioxide. Because without oxygen, your body is completely useless. You'd be like a high-performance sports car sitting in the driveway with absolutely zero fuel in the tank. Oxygen is literally the fuel that keeps your engine running.
So, here is our roadmap for today. First, we'll meet your respiratory system. Second, we'll cover the anatomy and map out the airway journey. Third, we're going to uncover the mechanics of breathing. And finally, we'll take a look at respiratory diseases and conditions.
Okay, Section 1. Meet your respiratory system. Let's uncover why our microscopic cells are so desperate for this system to function and why it's actually about so much more than just filling your chest with air.
You know, this one system actually juggles a whole bunch of incredible jobs. Yes, its main gig is pulling in oxygen to generate energy. Down at the cellular level, your body uses that oxygen to break down glucose into these little energy molecules called ATP. And while it's doing that, it expels the toxic waste product, carbon dioxide. But honestly, it does so much more. As air vibrates through your vocal cords, it allows you to speak. As air moves past your olfactory nerve, it lets you smell. By removing that carbon dioxide, it even acts as a chemical buffer, perfectly balancing the acidity levels in your blood. Pretty amazing, right? Moving on to Section 2. Anatomy, the airway journey. Let's map out the exact route a single breath of air takes as it travels from the outside world deep into your body.
Looking at this visual layout, you can see the respiratory tract is very neatly split into two main sections. You have the upper respiratory tract, which includes your nasal cavity and throat, and then the lower respiratory tract, which is your windpipe and your lungs.
So it's literally a step-by-step journey. A breath starts at your external nostrils and nasal cavity. From there, it moves into the pharynx, that's your throat, passes through the larynx or voice box, and drops down the trachea, which you probably know as your windpipe. Finally, it arrives at its ultimate destination, those spongy organs in your chest, your lungs, which then branch out into bronchi and alveoli.
But hold on, it is definitely not a free-for-all in there. Your nose and airways actually act like a high-tech security checkpoint. As the air enters, your blood vessels warm it right up. Then you've got these tiny hair-like structures called cilia, working together with some sticky mucus to create a brilliant filtration system. They trap dust, dirt, germs, and harmful pathogens so they never even reach your lungs. It's basically an automatic built-in air purifier.
As we travel a bit further down, we run into a seriously brilliant piece of biological engineering, the epiglottis. Now, your pharynx is actually a shared passageway for both air and food, so how exactly does your body know where to send each one? Well, the epiglottis is this elastic little cartilage flap that acts just like a railway switch. When you breathe, it opens up, letting air flow right into the trachea. But when you swallow food, it folds directly over the windpipe, routing your meal safely down the esophagus and into your stomach. So you know how sometimes you cough relentlessly if you try to talk and eat at the exact same time? That's because talking forces the epiglottis to open up for the air, which accidentally lets a tiny piece of food slip into the windpipe, instantly triggering a massive cough to blast it back out.
Okay, once the air safely navigates that switch and hits the lungs, things get highly microscopic. The trachea divides into a left and right bronchus, and then it just keeps branching out, kind of like an upside-down tree, into finer and finer channels called bronchioles. Finally, at the very tips of those branches, the air hits these tiny balloon-like sacs called alveoli.
And we aren't just talking about a handful of them. There are an estimated 300 to 400 million of these tiny alveoli sacs packed into your lungs. To put that into perspective, if you were to flatten out all those microscopic single-celled sacs, they'd cover a massive surface area of roughly 50 to 75 square meters. That is literally the size of half a tennis court, all folded up neatly inside your chest, dedicated entirely to exchanging gases with your bloodstream. Just incredible.
Section 3. The mechanics of breathing. So we've got the anatomy down, but your lungs don't actually have their own muscles to pump themselves. So how are we mechanically pulling this air in and pushing it out?
It all relies entirely on changes in pressure and volume inside your chest cavity. Let's do another quick hands-on activity. Place your hands firmly on your lower ribs right now and take a really deep breath in. Do you feel your rib cage expanding right beneath your hands? When you inhale, which we call inspiration, a dome-shaped muscle beneath your lungs called the diaphragm contracts, flattening out and moving downward. At the same time, your intercostal muscles expand your rib cage, pushing your hands outward. This makes your whole chest cavity larger, which drops the air pressure inside, literally sucking atmospheric air right in. Then, when you exhale, or expiration, the diaphragm relaxes, moving back up into its dome shape, the chest shrinks, the pressure increases, and all that foul carbon dioxide-rich air gets forced right out.
It's an incredibly smooth process, completely controlled by your brainstem without you ever having to think about it. And honestly, it's a good thing it's on autopilot. A normal person repeats this mechanical breathing cycle about 16 to 20 times every single minute. When you do the math on that, it adds up to roughly 20,000 breaths in just one single day.
Now, to really picture what happens during those 20,000 breaths once the air actually reaches the alveoli, let's use a bit of an analogy. Imagine your lungs are this massive international airport. The fresh oxygen molecules you just breathed in, those are your arriving passengers. The tiny alveoli sacs are the airport gates, and waiting right next to those gates are tiny capillaries carrying red blood cells. Think of these as the taxis. The oxygen passengers get off at the gate, step right through the thin cell walls, and hop into the blood cell taxis, which then speed off to deliver them to tissues all over your body. At the exact same time, carbon dioxide molecules, the outbound passengers, jump out of the taxis, pass through the gates back into the lungs, and catch a flight right out of your mouth when you exhale. It is just this perfect, continuous system of arriving and departing traffic. Section 4. Respiratory diseases and conditions. Now, just like any complex machinery, this perfectly engineered system can occasionally run into some trouble. We can actually categorize respiratory issues neatly into 3 main buckets, which makes them way easier to study and treat. First up, infections. These are caused by viruses or bacteria, things like pneumonia, the flu, or bronchitis, which cause a lot of inflammation. Second, we have chronic conditions. These are long-term structural or functional issues, like asthma, COPD, or cystic fibrosis, which narrow or even block the airways. And third, allergic reactions. This is stuff like allergic rhinitis, where your body's security checkpoint completely overreacts to something harmless, like pollen or pet dander. Because your respiratory system is quite literally exposed to the outside environment with every single breath you take, protecting it is really up to you. So here's your action plan. First and foremost, no way around it, don't smoke or vape. It completely destroys those protective cilia and damages the alveoli. Next, avoid pollutants. If you're doing a dusty hands-on project, just wear a mask. Also, stay hydrated. Drinking plenty of water keeps that sticky mucus in your lungs thin and easy to clear out. Exercise regularly to keep your diaphragm and intercostal muscles strong. And finally, you can prevent a lot of infections simply by washing your hands. Well, we've covered the structure, the mechanics, and how to maintain the health of this amazing network. But as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a bit of a provocative question for your next science lesson. Think back to our airport taxi analogy for a second. The lungs are the airport, and the blood cells are the taxis, right? Based on that, how exactly must your circulatory system, your heart and your blood vessels, and your respiratory system work perfectly together to keep you alive? What happens to the passengers if the taxis suddenly stop running? Ponder that next time you take a deep, effortless breath. Stay curious, keep learning, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.